Good morning from Helsinki, Finland. It's starting to get a little bit cold. A cold winter affects our will to continue supporting Ukraine. I'm joined today here in Helsinki by my friend Minna Alander. Minna is a Finn, but we met in Germany, where she was studying and then working at a German think tank. Finland obviously has this huge border with Russia, as well as a long history. Finns saw Russia invade Ukraine in 2014 when they illegally annexed Crimea. And then you saw the attack again on 24 February this year. How did Finns react to this? How did this affect how Finns think about Russia and about their own security?
In 2014, Russia managed to keep the fog thicker, and the situation with the little green men and everything surrounding the occupation of Crimea was much more ambivalent than this year with this very blatant full-scale invasion of whole Ukraine. But after 2014, the threat assessment became even more clear that Russia was definitely going in a very worrisome direction, and that it could become a serious threat in the Nordic region as well in the near future. So Finland started intensifying its cooperation with NATO and started building the highest possible interoperability in military terms with NATO and NATO troops.
Russia attacked Ukraine 24 February this year. May 18, Finland and Sweden both apply to NATO for membership. NATO will get better the minute that Finland and Sweden are both fully ratified and join the alliance. They both bring strong, resilient societies, strong, liberal, democratic values. They're both modernizing their militaries, and they both have thousands of talented women and men in the armed forces. Finland in particular has an exceptional rapid mobilization system that can put more than 200,000 troops in the field in a very short amount of time. Minna, what is it about Finland that gives it this rapid mobilization? I mean, what is it like here in Finland when we talk about rapid mobilization?
Apart from the military part of it, I think Finland's biggest strength is that it is like a whole society approach to security. So the Finnish comprehensive security concept really includes all spheres of life, all parts of society, from critical infrastructure to business to government, administration. Everyone and everything comes together and keeps the society up and running in case that is necessary.
So Finland is sort of the gold standard, actually, when we talk about societal resilience, strong, resilient societies. When you and I were speaking earlier, you talked about a preparedness culture. What does that mean? What does that feel like in Finland?
We have very comprehensive systems in place, and Finland has been always preparing for the worst. I would maybe describe the Finnish mentality as pragmatic pessimism, this habit of always preparing for the worst, then being kind of happy if it doesn't happen, but if it indeed does, then we're not surprised because we are prepared. So this includes literal infrastructure such as very comprehensive civil shelter infrastructure. For example, underneath Helsinki there's a whole tunnel system that can give shelter to up to 900,000 people. Helsinki city has 600,000 inhabitants, so it's rather comprehensive. In all bridges there are still placements for explosives, so just in case they can be blown and so that the enemy movement can be hampered that way. But this is all just one part of it. The Finnish comprehensive security also includes regular national defense courses for key stakeholders from the society, from government, local administration, critical infrastructure providers, business.
It seems like the Finnish government talks to their population as adults, and that this is part of the culture, obviously. Why is that so?
So the reason Finland has all this preparedness culture is that our geographical location is next to Russia, and Russia has always been and will always remain our neighbor. So although Finland has tried to have as good neighborly relations with Russia as possible. There has never been any illusions about the nature of our eastern neighbor. And for example, these national defense courses are not something that has been introduced this year. We have had that for decades, and it's a very long-standing culture in Finland to know that there's always the possibility of an attack from the east and that we need to be prepared at all times.
You lived in Germany for almost 10 years. How would you assess how Germans view societal resilience and being prepared compared to Finns?
In Germany's case, the mental place they are coming from is a very different one, because after the Cold War ended, Germany went through this very major kind of end of history moment with the German reunification, and there was this very strong idea that wars had kind of become obsolete in Europe, and especially that as long as Germany wouldn't start one again, then there would be no war in Europe. So what happened was that, for example, Cold War time preparedness systems were deinstalled in many German cities, including the capital Berlin, and that kind of led to this kind of idea that all that is not necessary anymore because there will be no more war in Europe. And Finland never had that kind of moment. History never ended in Finland. So we kept all this in place. We kept the conscription army when most Western European countries scaled down their military capabilities and went for more these like expeditionary force type of armies. So that is like a very fundamental difference between Finland and Germany. So I think that this situation with Russia actually starting a full-scale war in the middle of Europe really caught Germany quite off guard, because this possibility had not been considered for a long time from a German perspective. There are quite some similarities between the situation where Ukraine finds itself in today and where Finland was in the Winter War in 1939-40 against the Soviet Union, when the Soviet Union invaded Finland in an attempt to include Finland as part of the Soviet Union. Finland was also in the very similar underdog position back then, only received some limited material help from the West and had to fend for itself against a very mighty invader. That is also why Ukraine's fight against Russian invasion today feels so personal to many Finns. It instantly invoked this spirit of the Winter War and made Finns relate very strongly with the Ukrainian fight for freedom and independence.
In the weeks before Russia's attack on 24 February, the idea of Finlandization was floated as a proposal to avoid the conflict. Minna, what is Finlandization?
It's a period of Finnish history that is not remembered fondly in Finland, because it meant that Finland had to consider Soviet interests in the Cold War quite extensively, especially in its foreign policy and in its relations to, for example, Western Europe. And it did limit Finland's room for maneuver quite a bit back then. And it is not something that you can really impose on a country. At least half voluntary policy in Finland considered like the lesser evil compared to the risk of being invaded again by the Soviet Union. So it only worked also in the Finnish case because Finland had managed to earn some respect from the Soviet Union in the Winter War, where it very successfully fended off the Soviet attack at the time. So, for example, in Ukraine's case, there was never that kind of minimum amount of respect for Ukraine's sovereignty and statehood that you could base that kind of policy on.
Minna, thanks for explaining Finlandization. I'd never fully understood it or why other countries were trying to impose this label or a concept on Ukraine that didn't make sense historically. And now how you explain the fact that because Finland had done so well against the Soviet Union in the Winter War, there was this sort of a respect for Finland's sovereignty that Russia did not have for Ukrainian sovereignty. Minna, thanks so much for joining us today. So the Kremlin has changed its strategy to drag out this war as long as they can so that European nations, the United States, all of us lose the will to continue to support Ukraine as this winter and this war drag on. The last couple of weeks have seen a change in this conflict. Russia is failing in every possible category. The partial mobilization is failing. Ukrainian forces are having success. Russians are preparing to evacuate Kherson. And so, of course, what they've done, they've changed to the use of missiles and Iranian drones aiming specifically at civilian targets, hoping to somehow break the will of Ukrainian people, which is never going to happen, but also targeting the power grid, the infrastructure, in an attempt to make Ukrainian cities uninhabitable during the winter time. This is how desperate the Russians have become, and why it's so important that we, the West, stick with Ukraine, continue to deliver the things that they need so that they can, in fact, finish the job defeating Russia. I have this Ukrainian ribbon on my briefcase that I've had since September the 19th, 2014. I was still in the army at the time. I was the commander of NATO's Allied Land Command based in Izmir, Turkey. And I had gone to Lviv in Ukraine, and I was standing next to my friend, General Almantas Leka, who was the chief of the Lithuanian army. While we're standing there, a lady comes walking past and she says to us, "Who are you guys?" And General Leka says to her, "Well, this is General Hodges from U.S. Army Europe." She immediately burst into tears, and then she asked, "Are we going to help?" This was just 6 months after Russia had invaded Crimea. After we explained who we were and what we were doing, she gave me this ribbon off of her purse. And ever since then, I've kept this ribbon as a reminder of what people expect of the United States and what people expect of NATO, what we symbolize, and what a responsibility that is. From Helsinki, Finland, my name is Ben Hodges. I look forward to seeing you next time.